I already left. You just didn't notice.
The sink was leaking again at midnight, same as it had been for 3 weeks. Water dripped into the bucket with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Slow, steady, and getting on my last nerve. I crouched under the kitchen cabinet, flashlight between my teeth, wrench in hand, trying to coax life back into pipes that had given up hope around the same time my marriage did. "You know what your problem is, Mick?" I muttered to myself, tightening a fitting that had no business being loose. "You fix things that don't want to be fixed." The front door slammed upstairs. Heels clicked across hardwood, designer heels, the kind that cost more than I made in a week doing AT support for the city. Leah was home from another late meeting at Morrison & Associates, where she'd climbed from junior accountant to senior project manager in 5 years through what she called strategic networking, and what I was starting to call something else entirely. "Mick, you down there playing with your tools again?" Her voice carried that edge it had developed lately, sharp enough to cut glass and twice as cold. "Just fixing the sink," I called back, not moving from my spot. "You know that thing we used to wash dishes, clean stuff, basic human maintenance?" Her laugh had no warmth in it. "Right, because that's what you do. Fix things." I crawled out from under the cabinet, wiping my hands on an old rag. Leah stood in the kitchen doorway, still wearing her power suit, navy blue, tailored to show off the figure that had caught my eye 7 years ago at Murphy's bar. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that severe bun she wore to work, but a few strands had escaped, softening her face just enough to remind me why I'd fallen for her in the first place. "Rough day at the office?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Every day was rough at Morrison & Associates, according to Leah. Every client was impossible, every deadline unreasonable, every coworker incompetent. "You wouldn't understand," she said, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a bottle of wine. "You sit in that little basement office all day, resetting passwords and unjamming printers. You don't deal with real pressure." I set down my wrench carefully, counting to 10 in my head. We'd had this conversation before. Real pressure, right, like making sure the city's entire computer network doesn't crash and leave 50,000 people without basic services, that kind of fake pressure. "Don't be dramatic." She poured herself a generous glass of Pinot Grigio, not offering me any. "Victor says the private sector is where the real challenges are. Government work is just safe." Victor, there it was. Victor Drazek, her colleague at Morrison & Associates, former college football player, drove a BMW, wore suits that cost more than my monthly rent. Victor, who had opinions about everything and the bank account to back them up. "Victor says a lot of things," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Most of them about himself." Leah's eyes flashed. "He's successful, Mick. He understands ambition, drive, the willingness to do whatever it takes to get ahead." "Whatever it takes, I repeated. Interesting choice of words. She took a long sip of wine, studying me over the rim of her glass. "You act like I owe you loyalty or something. Like I'm supposed to limit myself because you're content fixing sinks and babysitting computers." The words hit like a physical blow. I stared at her for a long moment, this woman I'd married, this stranger wearing my wife's face. "Loyalty," I said finally. "Yeah, I guess I did think marriage came with some of that. Silly me. The return policy's expired anyway," I added, turning back to my tools. She set down her glass hard enough to slosh wine onto the counter. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, Leah. It doesn't mean anything." I packed up my toolbox, suddenly exhausted. "I'm going to bed. Try not to wake me when you come up." "I might not come up at all," she said to my back. "I might just sleep in the guest room. Give us both some space to think." I paused at the kitchen door. "Think about what?" But she'd already turned away, refilling her wine glass. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my bedroom, apparently, and lay awake listening to her move around downstairs until nearly 3 in the morning. 2 weeks later, she was gone. The divorce papers were filed on a Tuesday. By Friday, I'd changed the locks, forwarded her mail to her sister's place in Albany, and started sleeping through the night for the first time in months. The house felt bigger without her constant criticism echoing off the walls, quieter without her phone calls to Victor that always seemed to happen when I was in the room. I was getting used to the peace when she showed up at my door at midnight on a Saturday, looking like she'd been through a blender. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her perfect hair hanging loose around her shoulders, but it was her hands that made me step back, knuckles scraped raw, fingernails broken, a purple bruise spreading across her left wrist like spilled ink. Jesus, Leah, what happened to you? She pushed past me into the living room, pacing like a caged animal. I need to explain about Victor, about everything. You don't owe me any explanations, I said, though I closed the door behind her. We're getting divorced, remember? You made that pretty clear. It wasn't supposed to happen. The words tumbled out of her in a rush. It was just supposed to be drinks after work, networking. You know? But he kept ordering more wine, and he was so charming, so interested in what I had to say. He made me feel important. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Get to the point, Leah. We slept together. She stopped pacing, faced me directly. Once, just once, but he recorded it. On his phone. I didn't know until afterward. The room went very quiet. Outside, a car drove past, headlights sweeping across the window. He recorded you. He said it was just for fun, just between us. But then he started making demands. Wanted me to leave you, move in with him, said if I didn't, he'd send the video to everyone at work. To you. To my family. I studied her face, looking for the lie. Leah had always been good at manipulating the truth, bending facts until they served her purposes. But the fear in her eyes looked genuine, and those bruises on her hands were real enough. So you left me for him? No. She stepped closer, reaching for me. I left you, to protect myself. I thought if I just went along with it for a while, I could figure out how to get the video back, how to make it stop. And did you? Figure it out? Her laugh was bitter. He's not the man I thought he was, Mick. He's cruel, controlling. When I tried to end things tonight, She held up her bruised wrist. He didn't take it well. I wanted to feel sorry for her. Part of me did. But the larger part, the part that had spent 2 weeks rebuilding my life without her constant drama, felt something colder. What do you want from me, Leah? I want us to leave tonight. Pack whatever we can fit in the car and just go. Start over somewhere. He can't find us. Us, I shook my head. There is no us anymore. You made sure of that. Mick, please. No. I walked to the front door, opened it. You want to run from Victor? Fine, run. But you're running alone. She stared at me for a long moment, tears starting to track down her cheeks. I love you. I know I screwed up, but I love you. Only you. That's what they all say, I replied. Right before you changed the locks. I bought her a one-way ticket to Albany the next morning, drove her to the bus station, and watched her disappear into her new life. Then I went home, finished fixing the kitchen sink, and tried to convince myself that the hardest part was over. I was wrong. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later when I found my car keyed in the parking lot at work. Someone had dragged a sharp object along the driver's side door, spelling out a single word. Coward. Classy, I muttered, running my finger along the scratched paint. The city building's security cameras covered most of the lot, but this spot sat right in a blind zone. Whoever did it knew exactly where to park. I reported it to building security anyway. More for the paperwork trail than any real hope of catching the culprit. Dave Martinez, the head of security, was an ex-cop who'd known my family for years. He looked at the damage and shook his head. You got any idea who might want to mess with you, Mick? Ex-wife's boyfriend, I said. Guy named Victor Drozik. Works at Morrison and Associates downtown. Dave wrote down the name. I'll keep an eye out. You want my advice? Get yourself a dash cam, maybe park closer to the building for a while. That night I stopped by the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar 6 blocks from my house where the beer was cheap and the conversation cheaper. The bartender, Jules Morrison, was a 60-something ex-biker who'd run the place since before I was born. She had gray hair down to her waist, arms covered in faded tattoos, and ears that picked up every piece of gossip in a 10-mile radius. You look like someone pissed in your cornflakes, she said, sliding a beer across a scarred wooden bar. I told her about the car, about Leah, about Victor. Jules listened without interruption, polishing glasses with a rag that had seen better decades. Victor Drozik, she said when I finished. Big guy? Thinks his crap don't stink? You know him? He's been in here a few times, usually with some young thing from his office, buying expensive drinks and talking loud enough for everyone to hear how much money he makes. She set down the glass she'd been cleaning. Last week, he was asking questions about you. My beer suddenly tasted flat. What kind of questions? Where you live, where you work, what kind of car you drive. Told people he was an old friend trying to reconnect. Jules leaned closer, lowering her voice. But friends don't usually ask about security systems and daily routines, you know what I mean? I knew exactly what she meant. The next morning, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. Block letters on plain white paper. You should have left when you had the chance. That evening, I called my brother Greg. Greg Callahan was 3 years older than me and twice as mean when he needed to be. He'd done 2 tours in the Middle East with the Marines before coming home to work construction. He lived in a converted garage behind his buddy's house, drove a motorcycle that was older than both of us, and had never met a problem he couldn't solve with either alcohol or violence. "Someone's playing games with you," he said after I'd filled him in. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" I was hoping you might have some ideas. Greg's laugh was like gravel in a cement mixer. "Oh, I got ideas. Question is, how legal do you want to keep this?" "Legal," I said quickly. "Completely legal." "Well, that's no fun." "But, okay, first thing we do is figure out what this Victor a-hole is really up to. You said he works downtown?" "Morrison and Associates. Financial consulting." "Perfect. I know a guy who does security for that building. Let me make some calls, see what we can find out about Mr. Drazik's daily habits." While Greg worked his contacts, I did some investigating of my own. Victor's social media profiles painted a picture of a man who loved showing off. Expensive restaurants, weekend trips to the Hamptons, photos of himself at charity galas, rubbing shoulders with local politicians. But it was his LinkedIn profile that gave me the most useful information. Victor had joined Morrison and Associates 18 months ago, after leaving his previous job at a firm in Boston under what the corporate euphemism called mutual agreement. A little more digging revealed that the Boston firm had been investigated for misconduct allegations around the same time Victor departed. No charges were filed, but the timing was interesting. I was printing out everything I could find when my computer chimed with a new email. The sender's address was a string of random numbers and letters, but the subject line made my blood run cold. "Enjoying the show?" The email contained a single attachment, a photo of me sitting at my desk, taken through my office window. In the background, clearly visible, was the research I'd been doing on Victor. Someone had been watching me. Someone knew exactly what I was up to. I forwarded the email to Dave Martinez and called Greg. "We need to meet," I said, "tonight, and bring your friend from building security." "Sounds like things are escalating," Greg replied. "You sure you want to keep this legal?" I looked at the photo again, at my own face staring back at me from my computer screen. Victor wasn't just playing games anymore. He was sending a message. "I can get to you any time I want." "I'm sure," I said, "but legal doesn't mean we have to play nice." Greg's friend turned out to be a wiry ex-cop named Tommy Chen, who worked nights at the Morrison and Associates building. We met at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead, and nobody asked questions about why 3 guys were having a strategy session at 2 in the morning. "Your boy Victor's got a routine," Tommy said, spreading photos across the table between coffee cups and half-eaten pie. "Arrives at work around 9, leaves around 6 most days. But Tuesdays and Thursdays, he stays late, really late." "Working hard?" I asked. Tommy snorted. "If you'd call banging his secretary in his office working hard. Girl's name is Amanda something. Young, pretty, looks scared most of the time." Greg leaned forward, studying the photos. "Scared how?" "Like she doesn't want to be there but doesn't know how to say no." "I've seen that look before." Tommy's expression darkened. "Reminds me of some domestic violence calls I used to work." The pieces were starting to fit together. Victor wasn't just a garden variety a-hole. He was a predator. Leah had been right about that much, at least. "What about security?" I asked. "Cameras, guards, that sort of thing?" "Building's got decent coverage, but Victor parks in the executive garage. Private elevator, limited camera angles. If someone wanted to have a conversation with him after hours, that'd be the place to do it." Greg grinned, the expression making him look like a shark that had just smelled weakness. "What kind of conversation are we talking about?" "The legal kind," I said firmly. "I want to rattle him, not end up in prison." We spent another hour planning, working out details, timing, contingencies. By the time we left the diner, I had a plan that would either solve my Victor problem or make it infinitely worse. Thursday evening, I put the plan into motion. Victor's BMW was parked in its usual spot on the 3rd level of the executive garage, gleaming black paint reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. I'd been waiting in the stairwell for an hour, dressed in dark clothes, a baseball cap pulled low over my face. At 9:30, the elevator chimed. Victor emerged alone, whistling some tune I didn't recognize, car keys jingling in his hand. He looked pleased with himself, like a man who'd just gotten away with something. I waited until he was halfway to his car before stepping out of the shadows. Victor! He spun around, startled. In the harsh garage lighting, I could see he'd aged since the last time I'd gotten a good look at him. His hair was thinning, his face softer around the edges. Success had made him comfortable, complacent. Mick. He recovered quickly, straightening his tie. What are you doing here? We need to talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss. He turned back toward his car, but I moved to block his path. See, that's where you're wrong. We've got lots to discuss. Like why you've been following me, why you keyed my car, why you think it's okay to threaten me. Victor's expression shifted, the polite mask sliding away to reveal something uglier underneath. Threaten you? I think you're confused, friend. I haven't threatened anyone. The notes, the emails, the photo of me at my desk. I don't know what you're talking about. But his eyes said otherwise. Maybe you should talk to someone about these paranoid delusions. I stepped closer, close enough to smell his expensive cologne. Here's what's going to happen, Victor. You're going to stop playing games with me. You're going to leave me alone, leave Leah alone, and find yourself a new hobby. He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Or what? You'll call the police? Tell them what exactly? That you think I sent you some emails? Or I'll make your life very uncomfortable. You? Victor looked me up and down, taking in my jeans, my work boots, my calloused hands. You're going to make my life uncomfortable? That's rich. Do you have any idea who I am? What I'm worth? I know exactly who you are, I said quietly. You're a bully who likes to hurt women. You're a coward who hides behind money and threats. And you're about to learn that some people don't scare as easy as you think. Victor's face flushed red. You have no idea what you're dealing with, you blue-collar piece of crap. I could buy and sell you 10 times over. Maybe, but money can't buy you class, and it sure as heck can't buy you courage. He took a swing at me then, a clumsy right hook telegraphed from 3 counties away. I sidestepped easily, letting his momentum carry him past me. He stumbled, caught himself against his car. That the best you got? I asked. No wonder you have to trick women to get them into bed. Victor snarled and came at me again. This time I didn't dodge. I caught his wrist, twisted just hard enough to make him gasp, and shoved him back against the BMW. Listen carefully, I said, my face inches from his. This is the only warning you get. Stay away from me. Stay away from my house, my job, my life. Because if you don't, I'm going to introduce you to some friends of mine who don't share my commitment to staying on the right side of the law. I released him and stepped back. Victor rubbed his wrist, his face a mixture of rage and fear. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, I replied, walking toward the stairwell. It is. But as I heard his car start behind me, I knew I was wrong. This was just the beginning. Victor's retaliation was swift and vicious. By Monday morning, I had 3 missed calls from my supervisor asking why I hadn't shown up for work. When I explained that I'd never been scheduled for weekend duty, he seemed confused. I got an email from someone at the mayor's office saying you'd volunteered for emergency server maintenance, he said. Spent all weekend trying to reach you. The email, when he forwarded it to me, looked official enough. It had the right headers, the right formatting, even the right signature block. But I knew the mayor's IT liaison, and she was currently on vacation in Florida. Someone's spoofing our system, I told my supervisor. This is fake. You sure about that, Mick? Because if you're trying to dodge weekend work, I'm sure, check the server logs if you want. I'll bet you won't find any record of emergency maintenance being requested. He did check, and of course found nothing. But the damage was done. My reliability was now in question, my reputation tarnished by the suggestion that I'd lie to avoid work. That was just the opening salvo. Over the next week, Victor launched a campaign of harassment that was both sophisticated and petty. He signed me up for dozens of spam mailing lists. He left bad reviews for local businesses, using my name and contact information. He called my landlord claiming to be a concerned neighbor reporting loud parties and possible illegal activity. None of it was illegal, exactly. All of it was designed to make my life miserable. But Victor's biggest mistake was underestimating my resources. Guy's got skills, Greg admitted when I showed him the fake emails and forged documents Victor had been circulating. But he's sloppy. Look at this. He pointed to a line of code in one of the email headers. Metadata is still there. This was sent from a computer at Morrison & Associates, probably his office machine. Can we prove it? Better than that. We can use it. Greg had been busy building a network of allies. Tommy Chen was feeding us information about Victor's movements and habits, and Jules at the Rusty Anchor was spreading carefully chosen rumors about Victor's character and business practices. Even Dave Martinez at City Security was helping, documenting every suspicious incident and building a paper trail that painted Victor as an unstable stalker. But our biggest break came from an unexpected source, Victor's secretary, Amanda. She approached me in the parking garage of a shopping mall, looking over her shoulder like she expected to be followed, up close. She was younger than I'd thought, maybe 25, with dark circles under her eyes and a nervous habit of picking at her fingernails. "You're Mick Callahan," she said. It wasn't a question. "Depends who's asking." "I work for Victor Drazek. I know what he's been doing to you." She glanced around again, then pulled out her phone. "I've been documenting everything. The fake emails, the harassment campaign, all of it. He makes me help him sometimes, but I've been keeping copies." "Why are you telling me this?" Her laugh was bitter. "Because he's a monster, and I'm tired of being his victim. He thinks he owns me, thinks he can do whatever he wants because I need this job." She showed me her phone screen filled with screenshots and recorded conversations. "But I'm not the only one he's hurt, and I'm done being scared." Amanda's evidence was a goldmine. Not only did it prove Victor was behind the harassment campaign, it also revealed the scope of his predatory behavior. There were recordings of him pressuring female employees for inappropriate favors, threatening their jobs if they refused. There were emails discussing ways to discredit business rivals and former girlfriends. There was even a conversation where he bragged about breaking Leah and driving her out of town. "This is enough to destroy him," I said, scrolling through the files. "That's the idea," Amanda replied. "But I can't be the one to do it. If he finds out I'm the source, he'll ruin me. I need someone else to make the first move." I looked at her, this young woman who'd risked everything to hand me the tools I needed to fight back. "What do you want in return?" "Just promise me he'll never hurt another woman the way he hurt me. The way he hurt your wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected. "And yeah, I can promise you that." That night, I called a meeting with my team. We gathered at Greg's place, spreading Amanda's evidence across his kitchen table like generals planning a battle. "This is it," Tommy said, studying a particularly incriminating email thread. "This is how we take him down." "Question is," Greg added, "how public do we want to make this? We could leak it to the press, post it online, really humiliate the bastard." I thought about it, weighing revenge against consequences. Victor had made my life heck for weeks, but destroying him completely felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready to cross. We do it clean, I decided. Professional. We give the evidence to the right people and let the system handle it. The system that let him get away with this crap in the first place? Greg shook his head. "Sometimes you're too nice for your own good, little brother." "Maybe, but I'm not Victor. I'm not going to become him just to beat him." We spent the rest of the night planning our approach. By morning, I had a strategy that would expose Victor's crimes without making me a criminal in the process. It was time to end this. The Morrison & Associates building looked different in daylight, less imposing than it had during my midnight confrontation with Victor. I walked through the marble lobby like I belonged there, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would end Victor Drazek's career. The building directory listed the company's offices on floors 12 through 15. I took the elevator to 14, where Amanda had told me I'd find the Human Resources Department. Sarah Kim, the HR director, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who listened to my story with the kind of professional attention that suggested she'd heard similar tales before. I laid out the evidence methodically: the harassment campaign, the forged emails, the recordings of Victor abusing his position. "This is quite serious," she said when I finished. "These allegations, if proven true, would constitute grounds for immediate termination and possible criminal charges." "I'm not looking for revenge," I told her. I just want it to stop. And I want to make sure he can't do this to anyone else. She nodded, making notes on a legal pad. We'll need to investigate these claims thoroughly. That may take some time. I understand, but in the meantime, I'd like to request that Victor be suspended pending the investigation for the safety of your other employees. Sarah Kim studied me for a long moment. You really believe he's dangerous? I know he is. That afternoon, Victor was called into a meeting with HR and building security. According to Tommy, who watched the whole thing from the security office, Victor denied everything at first. But when they played Amanda's recordings, his denials turned to threats, then to desperate bargaining. By 5 o'clock, he was cleaning out his desk. I was waiting in the parking garage when he emerged, carrying a cardboard box of personal belongings. He looked older than he had a week ago, deflated, like someone had let all the air out of him. You think you've won, he said when he saw me. I think it's over. It's not over. I have lawyers, I have connections. I'll fight this. With what money? They froze your accounts pending the investigation. And those connections you're talking about, they're not going to want to be associated with you once the story gets out. Victor's face went pale. You leaked it to the press. I didn't have to. Amanda did that herself. Seems she had a friend at Channel 7 who was very interested in her story. I stepped closer. You made one mistake, Victor. You assumed everyone was as weak as you are. You assumed wrong. He set down his box and took a step toward me, hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to fight me again. But then the elevator chimed, and Tommy Chen emerged with 2 other security guards. Problem here, gentlemen? Tommy asked pleasantly. Victor looked at the guards, then at me, then at the box of his belongings sitting on the concrete floor. This isn't over, he said again, but there was no conviction in it. Yeah, I replied, it is. I watched him load his box into the BMW and drive away. Then I took out my phone and called Leah. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cautious. Mick, it's over. I said, Victor's finished. He can't hurt you anymore. There was a long pause. What did you do? What needed to be done? Legally and properly. I saw the news report. They're saying he might face criminal charges. That's up to the district attorney, but yeah, probably. Another pause. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still need to talk. About what? About us. About what happens now. I was hoping... She trailed off on me. I was hoping maybe we could try again. Start over. I looked out across the city, lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. A month ago, that's exactly what I would have wanted to hear. But a month ago, I'd been a different person. I don't think so, Leah. But Victor's gone. The threat is over. We could what? Pretend none of this happened? Pretend you didn't choose him over me? Pretend you didn't leave me to deal with the mess you made? I was scared. I made mistakes. You made choices, and now you have to live with them. I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But that part was getting smaller every day. I loved you, she whispered. I know, but love isn't enough, is it? Not when you don't have trust. Not when you don't have respect. So that's it? 7 years of marriage and you're just walking away? I'm not walking away, Leah. I already walked. You just didn't notice. I hung up and drove home to my empty house, where the sink worked perfectly and the only drama was whatever I chose to watch on TV. 3 days later, Victor Drazek was arrested on charges of harassment, extortion, and inappropriate conduct. The story made the front page of the local paper, complete with photos of him being led away in handcuffs. Amanda got a new job at a competing firm with a 20% raise and a boss who treated her like a professional instead of prey. She sent me a thank you card with a picture of her smiling at her new desk. Leah moved back to town a week after Victor's arrest, but she didn't contact me. I heard through Jules that she'd gotten a job at a small accounting firm across town, that she'd cut her hair short and stopped wearing designer clothes. Greg said I should feel sorry for her. Tommy said I should feel victorious. Jules said I should feel whatever I felt and not worry about what anyone else thought. But the truth was, I didn't feel much of anything. Victor was gone, Leah was someone else's problem, and my life was my own again. The house was quiet, the sink worked, and nobody was trying to make me into someone I wasn't. On a Friday night, 3 weeks after Victor's arrest, I was having a beer at the Rusty Anchor when Leah walked in. She looked different, smaller somehow, less sure of herself. She saw me at the bar and hesitated, like she was trying to decide whether to leave or stay. Finally, she walked over. "Hi," she said. "Hi, can I buy you a drink? I've got one." She nodded, ordered a beer for herself. We sat in silence for a while, watching the other patrons play pool and argue about sports. "I'm sorry," and she said finally, "for all of it. For Victor, for leaving, for the way I treated you." "Okay. Is that it? Just okay?" I turned to look at her, really look at her. The woman I'd married was still there under the fear and regret and hard-earned wisdom. But she was a stranger too, someone I'd never really known. "What do you want me to say, Leah? That I forgive you? That we can be friends? That everything's fine now? I want you to say something, anything. Even if you hate me, at least that's something." I finished my beer, left money on the bar. "I don't hate you, but I don't love you either. Not anymore. You ended that when you chose him over me. I never chose him over you. I was trying to protect bees." The word came out harder than I'd intended. "You chose him the moment you decided his approval was worth more than my respect. You chose him when you decided his money was more important than my loyalty. You chose him, and now you have to live with that choice." I stood up to leave, but she grabbed my arm. "Please, Mick, don't leave it like this." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at her face. "You know what your problem is, Leah? You think redemption is something you can buy, something you can earn, with enough apologies and good intentions. But redemption's for suckers. Some things can't be fixed, no matter how sorry you are." I pulled free of her grip and walked toward the door. "So what now?" she called after me. "You just walk away? Start over like none of this mattered?" I paused at the door, looked back at her one last time. "Now I live my life, and you live yours. And we both try to do better next time." Outside, the night air was cool and clean. I walked home through streets that felt like mine again, past houses where people were living their own complicated lives, making their own complicated choices. My house was dark and quiet when I got there, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like home. I fixed myself a sandwich, watched the late news, and went to bed in my own room in my own house with my own clear conscience. Victor Drazik was sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay restitution to his victims. Leah moved to another state 6 months later. I heard she got married again to an accountant who treated her well. I stayed in the house, kept my job, and learned to be happy with my own company. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Me? I like mine flaming, and that night I'd lit the match and watched it all burn down.